Silas spent the next 24 hours observing Nolan while meticulously planning a crisis. He couldn't risk physically searching Nolan's gear yet. A confrontation would happen on his terms, in his element. The tugboat's essential system, the lifeblood of its operation, was the hydraulics controlling the massive towing winches and rudder. A failure here, especially while navigating a tight channel or docking a tow, would be catastrophic. It would require immediate, deep intervention by someone who knew the system's precise schematics and vulnerabilities. During his 4-hour watch in the engine room, Silas executed his plan. He didn't sabotage the tug, he created an imbalance. Using a tiny specialized tool he'd kept hidden in a disassembled fire extinguisher, another piece of his maintenance gear, Silas subtly adjusted the calibration on one of the main hydraulic pressure regulators. He shifted the baseline pressure just 3% outside the normal operating tolerance. The change was minuscule. The tug would operate fine for a few hours, but the pressure differential would subtly stress the system. When the tug next exerted maximum power, say, pulling a heavy barge against a strong outgoing tide, the regulator would likely fail, causing a loss of hydraulic control on the main winch. Silas returned to the wheelhouse, his face impassive. He checked the operational orders. The ironclad was scheduled to rendezvous with a massive, fully loaded container barge, the Mako, in 4 hours. The task? Bring the Mako through the narrowest, busiest section of the shipping channel just as the tide began to turn, a maneuver that required peak winch power and absolute control. He casually mentioned the task to Captain Hollis during the watch handover. "Tight squeeze coming up, Skip." Mac said the hydraulics are acting a little stiff, but she should hold. This was the critical lie. It planted the suggestion that the engineer, Mac, was aware of a minor issue, providing plausible deniability for Silas and a reason for Nolan's handler to demand an immediate solution. The moment came 2 hours later. The ironclad was hooked up, the lines taut, pulling the massive bulk of the Mako against a rapidly stiffening current. The main winch strained, the steel lines humming with tension. Then the warning horn on the hydraulic panel shrieked, instantly followed by a violent shudder. The main winch seized, and the huge coiled line went slack for a heart-stopping second. "What in the hell was that?" Hollis roared, wrestling the rudder to keep the barge from swinging wide and hitting a pier. Mac, the engineer, was already on the radio from the engine room. "Pressure regulator just blew. I'm getting a massive loss of fluid on the main winch. It's a miracle the line didn't snap, Skip." This was the crisis. The winch was crippled, and they were minutes from a collision. It was a severe, complex mechanical failure that required Mac's specific, years-long experience to fix. Silas, playing the role of the stressed mate, grabbed the mic. "Nolan, get down to the engine room and help Mac secure that line. Move." Nolan, however, didn't head to the engine room. While the rest of the crew was focused on the chaos, Nolan slipped quickly not below deck, but up to the wheelhouse. He wasn't there to help with the lines. He was there to access the communications array. He moved with the practiced stealth that belied his rookie status. Ignoring the frantic shouted orders, he reached the console and pulled a small, specialized satellite communicator from a hidden pocket, a device far too expensive and technical for a deckhand. He was attempting to send an urgent data burst, likely a schematic or a diagnostic, to his handler, not an oral status report. Silas, feigning to check a chart, had been watching Nolan's reflection in the wheelhouse glass. He didn't need to fight. He just needed to seize the evidence. Silas moved. His hand shot out not in an attack, but in the practiced movement of a mate catching a rapidly whipping line. He grabbed Nolan's wrist, twisting the bone with surgical precision, forcing the operative to drop the satellite communicator onto the deck with a soft, expensive clatter. "That wasn't the engine room, Nolan," Silas said, his voice deadly quiet, cutting through the general chaos. "And that sure as hell wasn't fishing gear." Nolan dropped the facade instantly. His eyes narrowed and his hands came up, ready to deploy the training he'd been paid to hide. "You knew," Nolan hissed. "You're too clean, Nolan," Silas replied, pushing him back against the cold glass of the wheelhouse window. The sea has a way of showing you the difference between a real mariner and a cheap forgery. Now tell me who sent you, or you'll find out how messy a mate can be when he loses his temper. The spy is exposed, but the conflict